The world used to be full of life. Not just humans, but animals, birds, fish, trees, insects. Everything lived together like one big family. The rivers were clean, the air was fresh, and the forests were thick with sound. Lions roamed free, whales sang under the sea, and bees danced from flower to flower collecting honey. It was beautiful, it was peaceful. But then came humans, smart, curious, always building, always moving. They made tools, built homes, and slowly took over more and more land. At first it wasn't too bad. People lived close to nature. They hunted, fished, grew food, and respected the earth. But as time passed, something changed. People began to multiply like never before. More babies were born, cities grew bigger, and machines became louder. Forests were cut down to make way for farms and roads. Oceans filled with plastic. Air turned dirty with smoke from factories. Animals lost their homes. Some vanished forever. Humans didn't mean to hurt the planet. Most of them didn't even realize what they were doing. They were busy working, raising families, watching TV, using phones, driving cars. Life moved fast. And while people looked up at the stars and dreamed of space travel, they forgot to look down at the earth beneath their feet. Then something strange began to happen. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, ants stopped fighting each other. Instead, they began helping one another. Bees flew in large groups, avoiding certain areas like they knew something was wrong. Birds flew in patterns that looked like messages written in the sky. No one understood what was going on. At first, scientists thought it was weather changes or pollution affecting animal behavior. But then things got stranger. Whales all over the world began singing the same song. Dolphins formed, huge groups near human ships, and stared at them like they were trying to say something. Wolves howled in perfect rhythm. Elephants walked hundreds of miles across Africa and gathered in a hidden valley where no human had ever seen so many animals come together. Something big was happening, and humans didn't even know it. Deep underground, in the roots of trees and the webs of mushrooms, a secret network was growing stronger. Plants have been talking to each other through their roots for millions of years, sending signals through chemicals and tiny electric waves. Now, somehow, those signals were getting clearer, faster. Animals were listening. Birds used magnetic fields to send messages across continents. Bees talked with dances and vibrations. Elephants rumbled low-frequency sounds that traveled for miles. All these ways of speaking, once separate, were now connecting. It was called the convergence. And it was the beginning of something never seen before. Animals, plants, insects, even the tiniest bugs in the soil. They were all talking to each other, sharing pain, sharing memory, sharing knowledge, and most importantly, sharing anger. Anger at what humans had done. For centuries, humans had ruled the planet. They built cities, controlled nature, hunted, farmed, mined, and burned. They saw themselves as the smartest species, the only ones who could think, plan, and change the world. But now others were thinking too. The convergence spread like wildfire. In the skies, flocks of birds formed shapes that looked like warnings. In the oceans, whales sent out pulses that felt like thunder. On land, elephants gathered like ancient kings holding council. They were calling a meeting, not with words, not with paper or votes like humans did, but with feeling, memory, signal, song. Every living thing that could feel pain, loss, or fear was invited. This was the first planetary referendum. Animals didn't vote with ballots. They voted with their bodies. Bees buzzed in agreement. Fish swam in unison. Trees released chemicals into the air that signaled yes. And when the vote was counted, across every continent, every ocean, every forest, mountain, desert, and river, the result was clear. Yes, humanity must be stopped. Not killed, not destroyed, but contained. Like a wildfire, like a disease, like a storm. Humanity needed to be calmed, controlled, and taught a lesson. Only one problem remained. How? How do you stop a species that thinks it's above everything else? How do you make a Species that builds bombs and rockets understand that it's not alone. That was the next question, and the answer would come soon. Because while humans were busy arguing about politics, money, and power, the rest of the planet had already decided. The time for warning was over. The time for action had begun. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with part 2 hours, or turn this into a HFY story script, voiceover, or HFY animated video idea. The earth was no longer silent. Beneath the surface, deep in the roots, in the wind, under the sea, something had changed. The animals were no longer just reacting to what humans did. They were planning, organizing. And for the first time in history, they were united. The vote had been clear. Humanity must be stopped. Not destroyed, not hunted, but controlled. Like a storm that needs to pass, like fire that must be cooled. The problem was how. Humans were strong. They built machines that could dig into mountains, fly into space, and carry weapons that could wipe out entire cities. How could birds, bees, or even elephants stop them? But nature had its own ways. It started small. A strange silence fell over certain forests. Birds stopped singing. Bees disappeared from gardens. Fish swam away from fishing, nets as if they knew when and where they would come. Farmers noticed crops failing in some areas while growing wildly in others. No one thought much of it at first. After all, weather changes happen. But this wasn't weather. This was something else. In Africa, elephants began walking in long lines across the savannah, leaving trails that blocked roads and paths. In India, monkeys gathered in huge numbers outside villages, not to steal food, but to sit silently, watching. In Japan, crows dropped stones on rooftops in perfect rhythm. In the Amazon, vines grew faster than ever before, covering roads and buildings overnight. People laughed at first. Animals acting weird again, they said. But then things got serious. A major oil company tried to drill in Siberia. As workers set up machines, wolves appeared from nowhere, surrounding the site. Not growling, not attacking, just standing there, watching. Then came bears, foxes, and even birds circling above like a dark cloud. Workers fled. The next day, the equipment was buried under snow and earth, as if nature itself had pushed it back. In Australia, a new virus spread among cattle. Scientists couldn't find a source. No lab made it. No human error caused it. It just appeared. Cows got sick. Farms closed down. Meat prices rose. Some people blamed climate change. Others called it bad luck. But deep inside the jungle, bats celebrated in their own way. High-pitched sounds too fast for humans to hear. At the same time, in cities around the world, strange things happened. Dogs refused to walk through certain streets. Cats scratched at walls where wires ran behind the plaster. Pigeons avoided city squares where big meetings were held. People thought it was random. Coincidence, but it wasn't. The animals were watching, learning, adapting. And then came the first real warning. A team of scientists was sent to study a sudden drop in shark attacks near the coast of South Africa. Normally, sharks patrolled those waters, but now they were gone. Instead, dolphins were seen guiding surfers safely through the waves. Boats passed without fear. It was like the ocean had calmed itself. But then one morning the water turned red. Not blood, not pollution. Something else. A strange color that shimmered in the sunlight. When divers went in to check, they found thousands of fish swimming in circles, creating whirlpools that pulled ships off course. The current became so strong that 2 research boats crashed into each other. No one was hurt, but the message was clear. Leave this place. Back on land, the scientists were confused. Natural event, they said. Maybe algae bloom. But in the deep, whales sang a low song that echoed across oceans. It was a signal, a reminder, a warning. Meanwhile, in New York City, a strange event shocked millions. A massive flock of birds flew into Times Square during rush hour. Not just pigeons or sparrows, hawks, eagles, seagulls, and even flamingos from zoos. They didn't attack anyone. They simply filled the sky until the sun was blocked out. For 10 full minutes, traffic stopped. Phones dropped. People looked up. Then, as suddenly as they came, the birds vanished. No one could explain it. Video footage showed nothing unusual, but people remembered how it felt. Like something ancient had passed overhead, something bigger than any one person. Around the world, people began to notice patterns. Wildfires broke out near illegal logging camps. Floods hit cities known for polluting rivers. Drought struck places where water was wasted. Was it nature fighting back, or was it something more? Some people started to wonder. A young girl in Brazil saw trees grow overnight, blocking a road that led to a forest being cut down. An old man in Canada watched bears push over a fence built to keep them out of towns. A group of fishermen in Indonesia reported whales leading them away from a netting zone, saving both them and the fish. Slowly, quietly, the planet was changing, and still most humans didn't understand. Governments held meetings, news channels debated theories, scientists argued over data, but no one had answers. Because how do you prove something is happening when it doesn't follow normal rules? How do you measure intelligence in plants? How do you record thoughts shared between species? How do you fight an enemy that isn't really your enemy, but wants you to change? That was the question now. Because the animals weren't trying to win a war, they were trying to send a message. And soon they would make sure everyone heard it. Not just in forests or oceans, but in cities, in homes, in hearts, because the earth had spoken, and humanity had better start listening. Let me know if you'd like. For part 3. Next, I'll continue the story with the same style, making sure it stays exciting and easy to read. The world was changing. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like a puzzle being slowly solved. People were beginning to notice things they couldn't explain. Cities that had never seen snow got sudden blizzards. Deserts bloomed with flowers, overnight. Rivers changed direction without warning. In some places, animals walked freely through towns like they owned the streets. In others, trees grew so fast, they broke through roofs and cracked open old buildings. But it wasn't just nature, acting wild again, it was something more. Something organized. Deep inside the earth, beneath forests and oceans, the network known as the convergence kept growing stronger. Plants whispered through roots. Birds sent messages with songs. Whales passed warnings across thousands of miles. Every species, big or small, was now part of something bigger than themselves. And now the animals were ready for the next step. It started with a storm. Not just any storm, one that came out of nowhere, hitting the biggest city in the world. 1 minute the sky was clear. The next, dark clouds rolled in like an army. Lightning lit up the skyline. Thunder shook windows. But the strangest part was this. The storm didn't hit everything. It moved with purpose. It avoided hospitals. It missed schools. It skipped over homes where children lived. Instead, it struck only certain places, factories that poured smoke into the sky, banks that funded oil drilling, government buildings where leaders ignored climate change. When the rain finally stopped, people stepped outside and stared in shock. Trees had grown through roads. Vines covered fences. Pigeons, crows, and seagulls sat on rooftops watching silently. Dogs wandered the streets in groups, not barking, just walking like they were guarding something. No one was hurt. But everyone knew something had changed. In the days that followed, strange events spread across the globe. In Tokyo, a forest appeared overnight in the middle of a shopping district. No one planted it. It just grew. Tall trees stood where cars used to park. Flowers bloomed between sidewalks. A river ran down the main street, clear and cool. In London, pigeons began dropping tiny seeds into chimneys and flower pots. Within a week, gardens sprouted on rooftops and balconies. Bees followed, turning empty spaces into buzzing hives. In New York City, squirrels carried wires from broken power lines and dropped them into rivers. Lights went out in parts of Manhattan. But instead of panic, people felt calm. Without screens flashing and phones ringing, they talked to each other again. They looked at the stars. They noticed how quiet the city had become, and then came the message. It didn't come from the sky or from the sea. It came from inside. People began dreaming the same dream. A boy in Brazil saw elephants walking through his town, guiding lost animals home. An old woman in Germany heard birds singing a song she recognized from her childhood. A man in Kenya woke up crying because he dreamed he was a tree, feeling pain as chainsaws roared nearby. Millions of people started sharing these dreams online. At first, scientists said it was stress. Doctors blamed sleep disorders. Governments tried to ignore it, but the dreams kept coming, vivid, real, and filled with memories that weren't theirs. It was the convergence, speaking directly to human minds. Animals weren't just sending signals anymore. They were sharing feelings, pain, fear, loss, and hope. Some people laughed, others cried, but most were confused. How could this be happening? Then came the voice. One morning, every radio station in the world played the same sound. Not music, not news, but the call of a wail. Long and deep, it echoed through cities and villages alike. Phones buzzed with the same vibration, TVs flickered to life and showed images of forests, oceans, and skies. And then, in every language, the message came. We are alive. We feel. We remember. You must stop. It wasn't spoken like humans speak. It was more like a thought, planted in the yow. Mind, some wept, some screamed. Others fell silent. Governments called it a hoax. Tech companies searched for hackers. Scientists tried to find a source. But there was none. The message came from everywhere and nowhere, and still, it lingered. People started behaving differently. Some began planting trees in their backyards. Others refused to buy plastic. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer. Farmers stopped using chemicals. Cities passed laws to protect wildlife. It wasn't instant change, but it was real. Still, not everyone believed. There were those who fought back. Big companies hired guards. Politicians gave speeches saying nothing was wrong. Soldiers were sent to protect land where oil and gas lay hidden beneath the soil. But nature had already decided. In South America, a pipeline burst without warning. Not from sabotage, not from age, from pressure, built up by roots twisting around metal until it cracked. Oil spilled into rivers, but fish had already left. Birds flew away hours before it happened. In Africa, trucks carrying illegal ivory were blocked by a wall of bees, millions of them, so many that drivers had no choice but to turn back. When they reached the city, the bees vanished like mist in the sun. In Australia, wildfires raged near towns, but somehow flames turned away when they reached neighborhoods. Forests burned, yes, but only the ones that had been poisoned by mining waste. It was like the planet itself was choosing what to save and what to punish, and still the message remained. You must change. Some humans began to listen. Scientists started studying plant communication. Kids learned about animal intelligence in school. Cities built green spaces instead of highways. Laws were passed to protect forests, rivers, and oceans. But the question remained. Was it too late? Because even though some had changed, many still hadn't. Greed, fear, and habit held them back. And while nature had given warnings, it hadn't yet shown its full power. That would come soon, because the vote had been clear, and the time for mercy was running out. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with Part 4, or help format this into a HFY short story, ebook chapter, or even a HFY script for animation, video. At first, people thought the warnings were enough. The storms that avoided hospitals, the trees that grew overnight, the dreams that felt like memories not their own, the message that echoed through every radio and phone. We are alive. We feel, we remember. You must stop. But humanity is slow to change. Some listened. They planted trees, stopped using plastic, built new laws to protect animals and forests. Children began learning about nature in school like it was a living thing, not just a subject. In some places, cities became greener. Rivers ran clearer. Birds returned where they hadn't been seen for years. Still, not everyone changed. Big companies kept digging. Factories kept polluting. Some leaders laughed at the idea that animals could organize. Others called it fake news. A few even tried to fight back, sending soldiers into forests, dropping chemicals on growing vines, building walls to keep wild animals out. And so, the Earth made its next move. It started with silence. One morning, in many parts of the world, there were no birds, no chirping sparrows, no cawing crows, no singing robins, just quiet. People looked up confused. Then they noticed something else. No bees, no butterflies, no frogs croaking at night. It was like the planet had held its breath. Scientists checked their equipment. No disease, no poison, no reason for the sudden disappearance. But deep in, the roots beneath the soil, the network known as the convergence pulsed with energy. The animals weren't gone. They had chosen to leave, and without them, the world began to fall apart. Crops failed. Without bees to pollinate, fruits didn't grow. Gardens turned dry. Food prices rose. In big cities, supermarkets emptied fast. People who had never thought about insects suddenly realized how much life depended on them. Then came the water crisis. Rivers stopped flowing in some places. In others, they flooded. Rain fell only in wild lands, not in cities. Wells dried up. Clouds passed over towns but never let go of their rain. Water trucks were sent, but it wasn't enough. People panicked. Governments called emergency meetings. Scientists begged for answers. News channels showed footage of rivers running backward, of oceans rising and falling without warning. And always, in the background, the same question. Why is this happening? No one wanted to believe the truth, that the Earth itself had decided to act. In Africa, elephants formed long lines across highways, blocking trucks carrying illegal wood and animal parts. Soldiers tried to move them, but the elephants stood, firm, not angry, not scared, just watching. In Asia, monkeys took over abandoned farms, planting seeds where humans had left them empty. In some villages, people watched in silence as animals did what humans had failed to do, care for the land. In South America, trees refused to grow near polluted areas. Even when planted by hand, they died within days. But in clean soil, they grew tall and strong as if choosing where to live, and then came the biggest warning yet. A city vanished. Not destroyed. Not burned. Just gone. It was a small town in Canada, near an oil drilling site. One day people woke up and saw nothing but forest where their homes used to be. Trees stood where roads had run. Vines covered rooftops. Animals walked through. Streets like they had always belonged. No one was hurt. Everyone was safe. But the town was gone. Search parties went in. They found no signs of fire or flood, no trace of destruction, just nature taking back what had been lost. People around the world watched the footage stunned. Was this a miracle? A curse? Or something else entirely? Some called it justice. Others called it war. Governments reacted fast. Armies were sent to protect other towns. Drones flew over forests. Planes dropped chemicals meant to stop plant growth. Fences were built around cities, but nothing worked. Vines broke through metal. Trees bent steel. Bees swarmed drones until they crashed. Fish jumped onto boats and knocked over switches. Even house pets began acting strange. Dogs refusing to follow orders, cats scratching at wires, birds flying away from cages, only to return with leaves in their beaks. It was like the whole planet had woken up, and it was tired of being ignored. In schools, teachers told students the truth. This isn't magic, this isn't science fiction. This is nature fighting back. Children understood faster than adults. They talked to plants, listened to birds, watched ants work together. They asked questions grown-ups couldn't answer. One child wrote a letter to the president of her country. If you don't stop hurting the earth, Will it stop letting us live here? No one answered, because deep down they already knew the answer. The vote had been clear. Humanity must be contained. And now, containment had begun. In some places, borders were closed, not by governments, but by nature. Roads cracked under. Tree roots. Mountains shifted. Forests grew thick and wild, making travel impossible. In others, time seemed to slow down. Clocks stopped working. Phones lost signal. Lights flickered for no reason. It was like the world was saying, "You have taken too much. Now it is our turn." Some humans tried to fight back. They cut trees, shot animals, burned forests. But every time, nature responded stronger. More vines, more storms, more silence, and still the message remained. Change. Or be changed. Some people finally listened. They left the cities, moved to the countryside, planted gardens, learned how to live with nature instead of against it. They spoke to trees, listened to birds, shared food with animals. And slowly, the earth began to accept them again. But for those who refused to change, there was no mercy, only balance. Because the earth doesn't hate, it doesn't seek revenge, it simply corrects, like a body fighting infection, like a storm passing through, like a fire burning away the old to make room for the new. And so, the world changed. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until one day the cities that had once ruled the world stood quiet and green, and the animals, the trees, the rivers, and the wind, they sang again. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with Hyaninam Part 5 or help format this into a storybook chapter. Animated script or YouTube narration cue. The world had changed, not because of war or machines or fire raining from the sky, but because of silence. The kind of silence that makes you listen, the kind that makes you feel small. For centuries, humans had ruled the earth like kings, who forgot they were guests. They built cities that touched the clouds, dug into mountains for gold, and filled oceans with plastic like it was endless. They told themselves they were the smartest, the strongest, the only ones who could think and plan and change the world. But now the earth had shown them something new. It wasn't angry. It didn't want revenge. It just wanted balance. And so, slowly, one by one, the cities began to fall quiet. Not all at once. Not with explosions or chaos, just stillness. Roads cracked under the weight of roots. Buildings crumbled as vines climbed their walls. Windows shattered as trees pushed through them. The noise of cars, horns, planes, and people faded into birdsong and wind. Some places emptied fast. Others took years. People left on their own, realizing there was no more power, no more clean water, no more food coming from broken farms. Those who stayed learned to live differently, planting gardens on rooftops, collecting rainwater, sleeping under stars instead of ceilings. Animals returned first. Wolves walked through old city streets where dogs used to bark. Birds nested in broken windows. Foxes raised babies in abandoned houses. Bees swarmed around flowers growing in sidewalks. The world was breathing again. In the forests, life grew wilder than ever before. Trees stood taller. Flowers bloomed brighter. Rivers ran clear and cool. Elephants roamed where trucks used to drive. Tigers walked paths that once carried human feet. Nature was healing piece by piece like a wound finally closing. But not all humans were gone. Some chose to stay, not to take, but to learn. They lived in small groups, far from the noise and greed of the old world. They built homes from fallen wood, grew food without chemicals, listened to the wind and watched the stars. They spoke softly like they were afraid to wake something powerful again. Children were born into this new world. They didn't know what a smartphone was. They had never seen a traffic light. They played barefoot in the grass and laughed when birds sang back to them. To them, nature wasn't something to protect, and it was just life. Schools were held under trees. Lessons were about rivers, animals, and how to grow food. Teachers were old people who remembered the past and warned against repeating it. They told stories of the time when humans thought they owned the earth, and the children listened wide-eyed, wondering how anyone could forget that they were just part of something bigger. Technology did not disappear completely. Some tools remained: solar lights, wind-powered machines, simple computers powered by sun and wind. But they were used carefully, like fire, useful, but dangerous if left unwatched. Cities became museums. Places to visit, not to live. People walked through them like ghosts, touching the remains of a forgotten age. They looked at old buildings and wondered how things got so out of control. They read books left behind and saw pictures of crowded streets and burning skies. And they whispered to each other, "We won't make those mistakes again." Governments no longer ruled like before. There were no borders, no flags, no wars over land or oil or money. Instead, there were councils, made up of farmers, scientists, elders, and even animal watchers who said they could understand the language of bees and birds. Decisions were made with nature, not against it. People learned to speak the language of the earth again. They planted trees to say thank you. They let rivers run free. They stopped digging for oil and started using the sun and wind to power their lives. They gave back what they had taken, slowly, carefully, and the earth responded. Rain came back to deserts. Forests spread across burned lands. Oceans filled with fish again. Whales sang louder. Lions roared deeper. The air smelled cleaner. The stars shone brighter. It wasn't perfect. Some scars would never heal. Some species were gone forever. Some places were too broken to fix. But the world had been given a second chance. And this time humans were ready to listen. They no longer saw themselves as rulers. They were caretakers, part of a great living web that included every tree, bird, river, and stone. They understood. Now that they were not above nature, they were inside it, connected to it, dependent on it, and in return, nature forgave them, not all at once, not with a single act, but with time, with care, with love. One morning, a young girl woke up in her village near an old forest. She stepped outside and looked around. The sky was blue, the wind was soft. A butterfly landed on her hand and stayed there, wings gently fluttering. She smiled, and in the distance, she heard something beautiful. Birds singing, rivers flowing, leaves rustling, and deep in the roots beneath the soil, the earth whispered, "Thank you, sir. Let me know if you'd like this full story turned into an audiobook format, animated script, or YouTube narration, and I'll help you bring it to life."